Hey, it's Greg Ott here with MaritimeGardening.com. I thought I'd do another one of those garden tours. It's early September and some things are shutting down and some things are starting to ripen and lots of different things going on. So have a watch and let's take a walk with me. Alright, so I guess you begin at the beginning as always. Here I've got the squash trellis tree thing, right? The squash are still hanging off. I haven't supported these or done anything. I just let it, just been, just not by design, just by sheer neglect. I've just let them take care of themselves. They seem to be able to hang off of there and they seem to be doing okay. You know, one thing about the way I've done this is, you know, these aren't, you know, smoothed down or sanded or anything like that. They're very rough. And I think it makes it easy for the plant to sort of hang on to it, right? So there's something to be said for just being lazy with trellis materials because it's more natural and the plants just seem to be able to grab on better. You look over there, there's one of the larger ones way over there. And God knows what else is going on over there. I can't see. All the squash that I had growing in these beds are still just continuing to grow and continuing to gain in size. None of them have changed color yet. They're still quite green, right? And they're all, I just noticed another one. Anyway, they're all sort of hidden in the bushes there. I'll have to do a video where I do a squash hunt. But anyway, there's some nice looking squash in the bushes there, here and there. Parsnips I planted last November, still going good. You just leave them alone. Just let them take care of themselves. Carrots are doing good. Over here we've got more parsnips. They're doing great. I mean, they're a great crop to plant because you plant them in April and you just, other than a bit of thinning, you don't do anything. I haven't watered these. I've spent an hour on this bed and I've spent an hour on this bed in total thinning. I haven't watered them. Just let them do their own thing. I've harvested about over half my beets. Still got some left over there. The greens have been good. The beets have been good. I've pickled lots of them and I'm going to pick some more today and pickle some more. And that's a good point. You know, you don't have to do everything. I mean, a lot of the ideas we have about gardening come from the idea of a farm. You know, when you've got a full-time job and you have a garden in your backyard, you just chip away at things when you're able and you plant things that are sort of conducive to that. Right, so beets are a plant that, at least in my experience, you don't have to pick them all in one go. You can pick some and let the other ones go and pick them when you're... They just sort of keep. Not only do they keep, they just continue to get bigger, right? So they just keep on their own. And you pick them as you need them for cooking or when you're in the mood to do some canning, right? I got still got some pretty good ones in there. Right, let's pull this monster here. I'm picking these today anyway. Look at that guy. That is a massive beet. Look at, okay, I got a big hand. I'm 6'4" man, and you know that beet, right? That's 5 inches across. To give more than that, it might even. It's 5. It's at least 5 inches across. What a monster of a beet! That's the biggest beet I've ever grown. I wonder if it's. I think that's the biggest one in there. I just happened to notice it today. I thought I picked all the big ones, but I think that's it. The rest of them are, you know, still respectable. Like this res. In a grocery store, you rarely see a beet this big. Usually they're a bit smaller or this big for a good sized one. I don't think I've ever seen something like this in a grocery store. What a monster. And I haven't done anything, right? I just planted the seeds and mulched it, and I haven't watered this and nothing, right? The Swiss chard has completely taken care of itself. You know, a lot of people ask me, what do you plant as fall crops? And to tell you the truth, I really don't. I know I might plant, this year I blew it. I planted some spinach and they got eaten by something. And I forgot to plant lettuce. And it's now September and it's just a bit late to be mucking. I could, I suppose. Maybe I will. I just... the problem with this time of year is any sort of thing you plant as a fall crop, you gotta water it and nurse it along because there's no rain, right? Or not enough rain to nurse a seedling along. And I'm just, I just can't be bothered. Like, all these plants take care of themselves, right? I haven't watered my garden since early July, right? Since about the middle of July. Like I went away for 10 days in early July and came back. So around then, that's the July 11th or 12th, I watered the whole garden and it hasn't been watered since. But look at the size of these. Some of these Swiss chards are 2 feet high, right? I've just been harvesting them all summer long, and I'll harvest them until we get a really, really, cold, super cold frost, right? Swiss chard really can't take too much. They can take a bit of cold, but they can't take a lot. So this is a fall crop in my point of view, which I planted in April. Zucchini is still producing, and starting to look a bit, no, actually they're really not. They're not looking tired yet. They'll start to look kind of tired and worn out soon, but early September they're still going along. Still picking zucchini every couple of days and cooking them, giving them away, and making, I like to make zucchini relish out of them. The cucumbers are still trucking along. They're really starting to slow down, right? They're starting to get kind of funny looking shapes in there. But they are still producing. I certainly have enough. I have to make a batch of pickles today. These are pickling cucumbers, right? And I've definitely got enough to make a batch, that's for sure. But you can tell the plants, the leaves are starting to look yellow, and it's just not looking, healthy and vigorous anymore. So it's starting to pack it in. But I got an incredible amount of pickles out of this. This is a dozen plants here, right? There's 2 rows, 6 plants each row on this 10-foot long bed. And I've got a ridiculous amount of cucumbers, direct seeded for those that are asking. And I think the variety is called Regal Pickling Cucumber that I got from Bessie Seed. Really happy with this variety, great tasting. Not only that, but when they get big like this, a lot of pickling cucumbers, they don't taste like, you wouldn't use this for pickling. Right? This is just one I didn't notice, so it managed to grow to this outrageous size. Now, a lot of pickling cucumbers, when they get big like this, they don't taste good. They get sort of bitter. These actually still quite good as a salad cucumber. Maybe not as good as an ideal salad cucumber, but still, still great. Like we eat these in salads. They're fine. You might want to peel the skin off. It's a bit of a tough skin, but perfectly fine in a salad. Kale is still doing great. Looks a bit sparse, so that's just because I've been picking it a lot. I've been giving some away, and I've been trying to preserve as much as I can. So, but this is just as many plants as I had before. There's not as much foliage because I've picked a lot of the leaves using that cut and come again technique. But still very healthy, very happy. And in terms of pests, I haven't really had to use anything for quite some time. I came out here last week, and I pulled a lot of leaves off. There was a lot of damage, and that was mainly because there was, I hadn't kept up with it. There was a white fly. The white flies finally found their way into my garden, and they attacked all these kale. So there was something going on. So I pulled off all the affected leaves, ate what I could, and just tossed the rest. And I sprayed the whole thing with BTK, and problem solved. I really haven't seen anything. I haven't noticed any of those cabbage moths. I did the whole garden. I mixed up one small batch of that, which is like, I don't know, like a teaspoon per gallon or something like that. It's a relatively small amount you need per gallon. And just sprayed every, brassica, every plant in this family, every sort of kale plant or kohlrabi. And it seems to have just stopped the whole thing. One treatment for the whole garden. I'm telling you, if you buy one of those little tiny containers of that stuff, it'll last you years. And it's a fairly pest-specific approach, so I'm totally fine with that. And that was provided by Safers, another one of my sponsors. Over here, we got some strawberries are starting to produce. This is a day-neutral variety called Seascape, and they produce all summer long, and they really start to produce in the fall. So we're picking a bowl every couple of days, and this is a sort of new strawberry garden I made. This was a garlic garden. I jammed one squash plant in with the garlic in, I don't know, July or something, and it has just taken over, very recently taken over the space. And I plan to plant strawberries in here, and I'm going to try to see if I can just jam them in, because that's what I wanted to do this fall, was turn this into a strawberry garden. But I'm inclined to let this squash do its thing to see if I can get some squash out of it. It might actually work out fairly well, because I can jam the strawberries in there, and the squash will sort of protect the young ones from the sun and let them get established. Anyway, that's another video. Don't want to talk about that too much. So yeah, this was a garlic garden all summer long, and this squash just took over the space. So You saw a few weeks ago I did a video where I was picking all kinds of, I guess early August I picked all my garlic, and this squash plant was just a tiny nothing plant in this garden at that time. And since early August it's basically taken over. That's one plant. I think it's one. I'm pretty sure it's just one plant, and it's taken over almost the whole space. I've only got about 3 feet of garden left that's not squash now. So man, I'm inclined to think I might get at least 1 or 2 pumpkins out of that, right? I can see one forming down there. Right, there's one small. Looks like it was germinated. We'll see. There's another one over there. So yeah, I might get 2 out of it. There was a video where I moved tomato plants on a really sunny day. These are those plants here. Hard to see in amongst all this other stuff, but I'm getting tomatoes, right? There's a tomato. And in here, again, with all this other stuff, you can see there's a whole bunch of tomatoes in here. Right, so those plants made out, look at that. Those plants made out really well. Now if I can just get them to turn red before the frost hits, or I'll be making a lot of green tomato chow. This pea garden's completely done, packed it in. The potatoes are getting close to sort of a harvestable stage. I mean, they could be harvested now, but I've got other potatoes that are even more in need of harvest, so those maybe next week I'll deal with. These beans, the tall rattlesnake pole beans, are really producing heavily. I have to pick them every couple days. These aldrin beans down at the bottom, they're just about done. And to tell you the truth, this particular variety, aldrin, I wouldn't recommend them. It's possible that they're a variety that's preferred by farmers in a farm. They seem to have a thick, let me grab one here. Here's one. And they're all right, but they're not as good tasting. And I just find they're not, I think they've got like a thicker skin. I think they're really good for maybe mechanical pickers. And maybe they keep really well in shipping and transit and stuff like that, but that's not a concern for me. It's all about the flavor for me. Yeah, ugh, no. They're just not. I don't like them. I can say a lot of them are still in the vine here because I got enough beans that I got enough beans that I don't really need them. There's still a fair number on the vine, but I'm just not happy with them. These rattlesnake pole beans, by contrast, I mean, I prefer my beans. I'm being a bit dramatic here. I don't really like beans raw anyway. I mean, these were okay. You know, they were okay, but given all the varieties of beans, I wouldn't recommend the aldrin bean. These rattlesnake pole beans, if you can find a source for these, they're awesome. Even raw, sweeter, juicier. Great bean. Now over here we got a sort of pea and potato garden. Peas are done, although there's still a couple fat ones on the vine. And the potatoes are ready to be harvested, and I'm starting to harvest them now. I got a beautiful yield out of this garden this year. So let's see if we can grab one of these babies. There's one, that's not so big, but believe me when I tell you, well, of course it's going to make a liar of me, isn't it? But okay, so the garden isn't working with me here, but anyway, I got some big ones. I got a number that were about twice this size, and honestly, I got great yield. Anyway, these are still good potatoes, but this garden worked out great. This whole bed had seaweed. There seems to be a magical relationship between potatoes and seaweed. So this garden was I'll back out a little bit here. This garden was a bean garden last year, just like this one. I didn't pull the beans out at the end of the year. I did a video where I showed how I shut this garden down. I just cut the beans off at soil level and mulched the whole thing. And when it was time to plant potatoes, I just stuck them in the ground. There's a video that I did in the spring where I planted all these potatoes just using a stick in my hands, just to show that you don't even need any fancy tools. And it seems to have worked out great. But this garden had seaweed on it all last year, and then this year I mulched it with hay over the seaweed. And there was something about seaweed and potatoes. They seem to really get along together. If you have a source of, don't go and don't buy that rubbish at the garden center. Don't do that. Now, if you can't get free seaweed, just use something else, right? But if you're somewhere where you can get access to a material like that for nothing, or without burning too much gas, it does really seem to do something. There's something magical that happens with potatoes and seaweed. Maybe I'll do a video and pull these potatoes out. You let me know if you want to see that. I mean, I've already done a couple potato reveal videos, but people seem to love potato reveal videos. Anyway, I could do another one here, show you how this turned out. At least from among this group, I get some really good size, you know, like bigger than a baseball type potatoes. These were like a Romano bean. They're shut down. These beans were the French Filet, Maxi Belle. They were pretty good eating. But they're starting to shut down. They're kind of done. Here's the spinach that I planted that really didn't amount to much. So there's one there. There's one there. But I planted whole rows of spinach, right? And they just disappeared one day when they were really tiny, like when the plants were maybe an inch high. I came out here one day and they were all gone. I don't think it's an animal, because my experience with rabbits, the odd ones that get in, they just eat everything. They don't eat a couple. I think it's more of a snail thing, because I put some snail bait down as soon as I saw that, and the ones that were here at that time are still around. So I think it was just a snail situation. I got a lot of snails in my garden. Snails like mulch. For the most part, once the plants get of a certain size, they're not a problem. And I have ridiculous, I mean, people are always telling me, you need ducks. If you have a lot of snails and slugs and things like that in your garden, over time, especially if you're like me and you're near a wilderness area, you just get more and more birds in your garden over time. I don't need ducks because I've got thrush and all, you know, when I come into my garden, about half a dozen birds fly out of here every single time. And they're not eating my plants, they're eating the bugs. Or they're eating the little weed seeds that are in the hay, right? They're not eating the plants. I'd have no plants if they were eating the plants, because they're here all the time. And I'm hardly ever in here. For those that want to compare notes about peppers, here's my peppers. I got this blackberry sort of, or that's a rose, I think it's a rose growing into it, but half decent. I mean, these are the biggest, best peppers I've ever gotten here. I've had a really hard time growing peppers here, and I almost didn't bother this year, to tell you the truth. But we've had such a hot summer, you know, it worked out okay. To anyone somewhere that's, you know, hot, this doesn't look that impressive, but this is the biggest pepper I've ever grown in this location. So this should be about twice this size. But anyway, it's, you know, we still had frost at the middle of June. So spring came very late, and summer took forever to get here. For those that want to compare notes with on tomatoes, and the ones in my cold frames here are still not red. They're nice looking tomatoes. And just a note on things like blossom end rot. The first tomatoes that were produced in this bed, they all had blossom end rot. So I just threw them out. Didn't do anything. And now there's no blossom end rot, right? Because oftentimes all you got to do is just mulch and be patient and throw away the first. Often if the plants grow really rapidly, they'll get it. People say it's, you know, a lack of calcium, but all that means is that the actual blossom or the tomato or what, it didn't get a certain amount of calcium when it needed it during a certain stage of its development. That's my understanding of it. It's not that there isn't calcium in the soil. Calcium is a very common element. I mean, if you don't have calcium in the soil, you've got some pretty unique soil. It's usually just the plant couldn't get enough when it needed it at a particular point in time. Once the plant roots get more mature and they get deeper and they get broader, they're able to take it up and find it and deliver it to the plant as needed. And so it's usually your first few tomatoes have that blossom end rot. As soon as you see that forming on the tomato, just snap them off and throw them out. Don't let the plant, send any more energy to that plant fruit. And then problem solved, because let's see, all these are fine. And they will be fine, right? Let's see if this one looks like it's got it. Yep, see, there's one that's got the blossom end rot. So am I gonna go buy a whole bunch of stuff at the garden center? No. Right? Does this one have it? No. Right? Does this one have it? No. Right? Just the earlier one. See how it's turning red? It's an earlier one. They have it. So you just, fire them in the woods. That's all I do. And out here we have the beds outside of my fence, right? Exposed to the wilderness and the wild animals and such. And all of these beds have been very low maintenance and very productive. I was supposed to build nice trellises on these tomatoes. I didn't. And the plants just sort of grew and flopped over, and I just, whenever they sort of find their way into the walking paths, I just sort of flip them back into the garden. So basically the laziest attempt I've ever made at growing tomatoes. But it still resulted in a good crop. It's hard to tell because everything's in a big mess here, but I got lots of tomatoes in here. I'm filling a bowl every couple days. That's the rate I want things, any given plant, a bowl every couple days is about as much as effort as I want to have to expend. Right? So that's good. There's some sort of squash growing in here, but I don't know that it's going to amount to much. We'll see what happens. What is this? Tomato. This was a potato garden. They're all gone, all picked. This was all onions, but a couple of volunteer tomatoes came up on their own, so I'm getting those. There's a volunteer potato because there was potatoes in this garden last year, so that looks like it's almost ready to be picked. And at the very end, I planted some squash, and as you can see, the squash are becoming big squash. That thing's over a foot from top to bottom. It's almost a foot wide. Nice one. It's just hanging off the fence. I haven't supported it in any way. It seems to be okay. I don't know really how it's not fallen off of that, but anyway, it's alright. I'm just going to leave it. This was a little potato garden I made in a real hurry. And it's doing great. These are starting to die now, so they're ready to harvest. And over here I got some squash and some different kinds of tomatoes, and I've been harvesting the tomatoes for about a week now, and they're starting to turn red, and I'm getting a few squash here. So this is a hugelkultur bed, and so was that. And this is the one I made last fall, where I made that video with sort of hillbilly music. Me using a chainsaw and axe and stuff like that. That's that bed right here. I was really happy with this bed, growing the onions in it. I just plugged the onions in it. And all of these hugelkultur gardens, if you do a lot of reading about hugelkultur, they always say just, plug the plant in, and that's pretty much what I did. I just plugged in, whether it was a transplant or a seed, I just plugged them in, and in the spring, and just let the rain do all the work. These worked great. I'm really happy with them. Alright, so that just about does it. Another tour around the garden. It's a busy time of year. There's not a lot of work to do in the garden in terms of getting things to grow. All the work is just dealing with what grew, right? All the picking and processing and storing and stuff like that. But you just chip away at it. I come out here for about an hour a day. This time of year is the most work I do in my garden. It's collecting the food, and I spend about on the weekends I spend a bit more time, and of course I've got this YouTube thing to do. But in terms of the work I do in the garden, it's probably about an hour a day, and that's just collecting food. That's it. It's just all collecting food and then dealing with it. So I hope that helped you and gave you some points of comparison for your garden. I'm here in Nova Scotia, Canada, with the climate conditions I have and what I've got to work with here. gauge where you are accordingly. I hope you found that useful, and if you did, please like, subscribe, share, and all that good stuff. Check out my podcast, maritimegardening.com. And until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in my garden. Thanks for watching.